Good evening all. So today I'd like to discuss the exception part of Spring Boot application. Basically the exception handling part of Spring Boot application. In the last class we have already discussed the Spring Boot data JPA on hand example. I have already showed to you. Now we'd like to discuss the exception part. How we can handle the exception in Spring Boot application. All of you know that exception is one of the important feature of Java. So whenever an application is running fine or is working as expected, but due to some reason if the normal flow has been disrupted, that time it will throw the exception. So there are two type of exception. One is checked exception. That class directly inherit the throwable class, but the checked exception is not the runtime exception, because checked exception are checking during the compilation time, during the compilation of any Java application. If I give the example, so the example of the checked exception are IO exception, SQL exception. So these are the example of checked exception. Now I will give the overview of unchecked exception. So unchecked exception, basically the exception which inherit the runtime exception are known as the unchecked exception. Basically the arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, array index bound of exception. So whenever you are trying to iterate some array, suppose you are trying to there is one array, so the size of array is 5. So you are so if the array size of is 5, that means we can iterate I equal to 0 to I equal to 4, because arrays initialize starts from 0 itself. But if you want to get the value I equal to 5 or I equal to 6, then you will get this kind of exception, array index out of bound exception. So this kind of exception are unchecked exception. Similarly null pointer exception, arithmetic exception. So these kind of exception are basically called the runtime exception. That's why it is called the unchecked exception. Now I will give you the overview overview of the exception handling part of the Spring Boot application. So let's check. So as I have already showed the earlier on yesterday, the last class video, so how the Spring Data JPA work. So this is the entire world Spring Boot structure of any application. Now what I need to do here, if you see, I have created one package called com.sourav.exception. So if you see here, I have created the package called com.sourav.exception. So basically I am just giving you the overview, the requirement. So here what I have done, we are just adding the data via Postman into the database. So while adding the data into a database, we are just checking two things: whether the data has already present or not. That time we will throw the exception that employee has already present. And the second time is if you want to update that details of any of the employee, whether the employee present or not in the particular database. So in that kind of exception, we are just created the class called no such customer exist exception, or you can write no such employee exist exception. So all other packages should be the same, because this is the main class, the controller class, the domain class, everything should be same. So here what I need to do, I have created one more a package called com.sourav.exception, where what I have done, I have created two exception, custom exception. So you know, right? So here I am giving you the overview of custom exception. So custom exception is one of the important feature for any application, because whenever you are trying to build any application, you don't need to keep like any general exception. So rather you just keep the custom exception. So what is the advantage of custom exception? The advantage of custom exception is whenever you want, you can modify the error message. so you can give the dynamic error message. So if you want to change the error message, so whenever the end user are facing any exception, so they will get the proper error message. So that's basically one of the benefit of the custom exception. So one thing you should keep it in your mind, then whenever you are trying to generate custom exception, you should extend that class runtime exception. So here you can see I have created custom exception called public class customer already exist, which has been extend the runtime exception. And here what I have done, I have just keeping these two constructor. So this is the parameterized constructor with string message, okay, and this is the non parameterized constructor which is inherit the super class. The same thing I have done for the this custom exception, that is no such customer exit exception. So you can call no such employee exist exception. The same thing I have done for the two classes. Now what I have done, I have given here the global exception handler. Now I will tell you what is global exception handler. So here whenever you are trying to handle the exception globally, then what you need to do, you need to keep the controller advice annotation for the exception class. So whenever you are added that controller advice annotation, so what it will basically do, if you hover this one, it will do the classes annotated with controller advice can be declared explicitly as Spring Beans or auto detected via class path scanning. All such beans are sorted based on the order semantics or order priority declaration with order. That means whenever you are adding controller advice, so that means the exception will globally handle for this kind of application. So you might can create one exception, or you can create that is exception handler in another class, but that exception handler annotation will not handle the exception globally. It will whenever, so you can see, so there is a difference. So whenever you are going for any interview, they will ask this type of question: what is the difference between controller advice and exception handler? Controller advice are associate with any class, but exception handler is associate for any particular method. If you see here that response entity exception method, in the top of the method I am keeping that exception handler which is handle the particular this exception. So that means the exception handler can handle for any specific exception, not the global exception. But whenever you are added at the rate controller advice annotation, that controller advice annotation handle the exception globally for the entire application. So that's the difference between controller advice and exception handler. So controller advice is associated with the class itself, so you just keep at the rate controller advice in the top of the class. But whenever you are adding the exception handler, you just keep the top of the method, and inside that you just keep the class name for the custom exception. Whatever the custom exception you have created, you just keep the class name called value equal to custom exception dot class. Okay, now here you can see I have created one method called response entity object exception, and I am just keeping that parameterized no such exist exception. So I am returning no such employee exists. So here this is the message, means if you so if you see here, so here in that return new response entity. So in that response entity, what I am returning, so if you hover the response entity, you can see create a response entity with a body and status code. So what is the body? In the body we are just passing the dynamic exception message. So that's the advantage of creating custom exception. So wherever you want, you can keep that dynamic message over here. So here I am just keeping for this no such employee exists. That means whenever you are trying to update any employee which is not present into our database or our record, then we will throw this one, the no such employee exists http status dot not found. Okay, so the same thing here we are just keeping, so that message is changing, so employee already exists. That means whenever you are trying to add the same employee twice in the database, so it will call this particular class and it will throw this exception, that is employee already exists. Now I will show you how we have handled in our controller class. So if I show you the repository, we haven't done changes anything. Whatever I have discussed in the last class, the same thing I just keep in the repository. Go to the service class. Yes, in the service class, as I have already mentioned earlier, the service class is the main business logic which has been written inside this class itself. So that's why if you check here, find all employee by ID, that means whenever we are trying to fetch the employee by ID, so here we are just doing the slight modification. What we have done here, you can see like that. First we just need to take store the employee details over here. If employee not found, then we are just throwing the new exception, no such customer exit exception, and if you hover this one implementation, then it will come over here and it will take this one, as we have created the constructor over here with that with one argument, so that it is coming over here itself. So that means no such customer exit exception it will throw. Now else return E. If the E is present, then it will return E. If the suppose if you want to fetch the details which is not present in the database, then it will throw no such customer exists or no such employee exists. So based on the requirement, you can change your message, and if the records are present, then it will return the value. Now while adding employee, so what we need to do, if first we need to check whether the employee is present or not. If the employee is not present and the EMP value is coming as null, then we are just simply added those employee details into our database. If employee is not present, then we are just keeping the value like that. If the employee has already present, then we are just keeping the value like that, employee already exists. That means you can't add the same employee twice into the database. So this is the one of the scenario. The scenario number 3. So this is while updating the employee. So this method was not present on yesterday's video. So today I have introduced because if I will give you the more examples, so you can understand easily how the things will work. So whenever you are trying to start your working in your office project, so you can grab those things easily. So here, so whenever we are trying to update the employee, first what we need to do, we need to fetch whether the employee records are present or not into the database. If it is not present, then we will keep the same thing, no such customer exists or no such employee exists. Else what we need to do, we need to set here, you can see like that, we are setting the city, we are setting the name, and we are just saving in the employee table, and we are returning the details record updated successfully. If you want to return the any custom message like that ID, employee ID record update successfully, or employee name record update successfully, then it will come based on that itself. So this is the changes I have done as of now for this particular service class, because service class is the business logic class where we are writing the business requirement as per our the business logic part as per our requirement. Now coming back to the controller class, so we don't have much changes on the controller class because these post mapping, find all, find by id has already present in the last class. I just introduced this one update employee method because and give the put mapping, so all of you know that. So whenever you are trying to update any details or anything, you need to use this annotation at the rate put mapping. So yesterday we have showed at the rate post mapping while entering the new details into the database. We have showed at the rate get mapping whenever you are trying to fetch any details from the server itself. Now I have already showed the put mapping. So whenever you want to update any specific records into the DB, you should give at the rate put mapping. So now I'll already have started the server. So let's check. So first we'll check with one record. So here I have already added one record called my record. So let's add one more record, Garfield, name, and post looks good too. So if I check here, select start from employee, yes, awesome. Now I need to get using find all. So awesome. So here you can see like that both the record we are getting successfully. Now I will show you the first scenario. If I am trying to add the same thing, means the first one I have added mine one. So here I am just trying to add this one. Okay, I just make get to post, remove find all. Awesome. Now I just need to insert one more time with my details into the DB. You can see employee already exists. Why? Because whenever you are calling this one, so it will come here add employee, then it will come here, it will check whether employee is present or not. If the employee is, in our cases employee is showing as not null, then it will come to the else part. It will not go to the if part. In the else part it will calling that particular custom exception, customer already exist exception, and it will throw this error employee already exist. If you let's change the name and check whether it will add or not. No, because the same thing ID is already present and we are fetching based on the ID. Here you can see like that, right? So that's why employee is coming at not null and it will throw employee already exist. Now what I need to do, we need to update the name. So let's do one thing, we need to update the name. So here if you see here, so there is two records, one is Kolkata Saurav, two is Pune Garfield. So I need to update this name from Saurav to Ritama. What I need to do, here put already is there, and let's check what is the controller method put mapping update employee. So let's copy that one, keep it here, name equal to so here ID just a moment, let me check on this. So we might need to give here update employee. Yes, so here if you just need to update this one, record updated successfully. So here ID1, I am just keeping name equal to Ritama because I just want to update the employee name from Saurav to Ritama. Now let's check with this. Awesome. Now ID has been updated Saurav to Ritama. Now if you want to add again Saurav over here, so if you want to add again Ritama over here, now you will get this employee already exists. Why? Because Ritama is already present with this specific ID. Now I will show the no such employee present. So let's check with the get find by ID. So let's check with one valid scenario. Wow, awesome. Ritama's name is present. Now I want to check with ID 5. No such employee exists. Why? Because whenever I am just keeping here, it will come over here, it will go here, it will check whether the employee is present or not. If the employee is null, then it will throw no such customer exit exception. And if the employee is not null, then it will return the employee. So that's the advantage of creating global exception. So that's why I am giving over here exception handler in the controller advice. So it will handle exception globally for entire application. So now the scenario 3. So we have already discussed these two. While trying to add the existing record, we are giving customer already employee already exists. Whether we are trying to find the record which is not present in the DB, we have already got no such customer exists. Now I want to update the record which is not present into the DB. The same thing, click on the put. Instead of this, update employee, and here you can keep ID equal to 7 and rest is fine. No such employee exists. Why? Because ID 7 is not present. So whenever you are trying to update the employee which is not present into the database, then it will throw no such customer exists. So this is the important feature of Spring Boot application of the exception handling part. So in the controller advice, we can handle the exception globally. So you can see like that. So the whenever we are trying to face the exception, the application shouldn't be shut down because we have already attached the controller advice and we have handled the exception globally for the global purpose. So this is the important one of the feature of the Spring Boot application in exception handling part. So I hope you have already understood whatever I have showed as of now.